Hi, thanks for coming out on a rainy, awful, almost snowy night. Please be safe tonight. Thanks all for coming. Let me kind of give you a sense of what happened, and I'm going to go back to about 1990. Any of you grew up in Bucks County and maybe were going to 4th or 5th or 6th grade in 1990? Few, right? Okay. So I was the guy who would go from school to school because we had a time slot on PBS to do this Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego project. And we needed to know what kids knew about the world. Because you got to have a baseline, right? You got to start somewhere. So I'd hand out index cards to everybody, all 30 people. I'd say the teacher, one of you fill it in two. And I'd say, write down everything you know about England. And they would write down, London, maybe Big Ben, often Eiffel Tower. And oftentimes the person who wrote Eiffel Tower down was the teacher. So of course this was a source of terrific amusement to us, and every once in a while we tried France, and we were in the Council Rock School District, Central Bucks County, somewhat upscale, so when we did the same exercise with France, many of the children wrote down wine. Makes sense, right? The teachers inevitably wrote down Big Ben. It's like, okay, we got a problem. So so at the beginning it was a really, we were making fun and we were like, oh my God, we got a big, huge task to do. And this was at a time when there were articles written about, or some sort of research study in which half of Americans didn't know what country was to the south of us, and those who lived closer to Mexico didn't know what was up north. So real problem, and how do you solve it? And here we're standing in front of a 1,000-inch TV set, or whatever it is. TV seems like a really good solution because it's in everybody's house, right? It's sort of like maybe we can teach people about where the Eiffel Tower is, and along the way maybe we'll teach them something about Africa or Indonesia or other places. So that was the motivation behind doing the Carmen Sandiego series that worked, but it worked for a very important reason, and I'm going to get into that in terms of what we all do. It worked because we had a sign up in the office that said no geography. I find staff members, ask them to put money in the jar if they said the word geography, because I figured that's the absolute best way to make sure nobody watches. And that lesson has carried. So what's happened is we don't focus on the subject matter specifically, particularly if you're working with television. Instead, we focus on the entertainment. We try to bring people into the tent and then teach them. Now, if you go back to the early days of Sesame Street, you'll find they realized a very, very similar situation. So they would emphasize the puppets, they would emphasize the music, but they wouldn't say to kids, okay kids, you're gonna learn some stuff now, right? That doesn't play. So let's advance now a few decades. This was 1990, here we are in 2015. And I started working, this is the third year I've been working on a similar project for adults. Because I feel, and maybe some of you feel, that we just don't know everything we ought to know, that we feel like, yeah, maybe we're about an inch away from that teacher who was putting Big Ben in Paris. Maybe there's more that we're supposed to know, but there's a problem. Several of them. The biggest is, schools aren't set up to feed you that, to feed us that. Schools aren't set up to provide a broad-based education about everything you possibly could want to know. Now, it turns out along the way, all of us ended up with these funny little pocket devices that we're using to take pictures. Hi, I'll post for you if you want. Right? And it's access to everything, or so it seems. So we initiated a project, and I'll break this down for you a bit. So I run a public television station in the city called Mind TV. You've seen it, some of you, I hope. Yep. And we're partnered with NHK, which is NHK World, which is a Japanese public television network, and we're partnered with RT, which is a Russian-American network, and we're also partnered with France 24. So we cover the world, and we've also produced, or caused to produce, over 1,000 5-minute learning programs. So we're really into the learning thing, but we're also into let's have fun with it. So we produced about 250 funny little animations that remind you that learning can be as much fun as watching Nickelodeon. The new thing, and you'll probably want to take a look at it, I hope you will, is called independencemedia.org. Our mother company is called Independence Media, so we're using that site to park development of our new project that will probably look a bit more like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, but for adults. We'll talk about that. This is my blog. I write about this stuff sometimes, and sometimes if I get a good meal in Venice, I'll find out about that there as well. And there's an ebook that if we have time I'll talk about called The Creative Professional that I think is in the iBook store, might be on Kindle as well. So that kind of gives you places to look for stuff. But let me give you a sense of what we're working on, what we've discovered, and some lessons learned along the way. And the first and biggest lesson is do it big. Small stuff doesn't resonate much in this marketplace anymore. There's just too many. There's too many of us in the room. There's too many things going on. There's too many apps. There's too many websites. There's too many blogs. So if you don't do it large, the chances of it succeeding aren't very great. And that means you have to devote time to it, and you have to really, really dig in. And I didn't understand what that meant when I was starting to go into this new venture. But Mind, Independence Media, is building something new that you are among the first to hear about. So I thought that would be a good subject for talking about. It comes from a place that's very similar to where Sesame Street was in 1966 and 1967. There's this realization that if we don't know everything we should, maybe there's a way to organize that, and maybe there's a way to set up some sort of a curriculum. That's the place we begin. So if you're teaching kids, how many of you are educators or have educators in the family or similar? So you hear a lot about curriculum and about core standards and all that. And all of that is sort of the envelope in which we spend more money than we do on anything else in America, combined state, federal, local, except probably for the combination of law enforcement and national security. We spend more money on learning. And here's the thing that's really interesting about it. Almost all the money goes to people who are less than 20 years old. How many of you are less than 20 years old? How many of you are more than 20 years old, right? So it's all of it, but there really isn't a funding program because there's not much of an impetus to teach us. We're in positions where we've figured it out on our own. So we go to the bookstore and we buy a really fat book about some programming language, but we kind of miss the subtlety of we're bombing Syria, and half of us, or probably more, don't really know where that is or what that means, or probably couldn't compose 3 or 4 sentences about the place. And yet we're taking tremendous responsibility on the world stage. It would be better if we knew more, but we're probably not going to read a big, thick book about Syria. We might get through the Wikipedia article, and that might be as far as we get. That doesn't seem right to me. Now, doesn't mean that you can look at every bit of knowledge and say, why don't we do a puppet show about this? Why don't we do a puppet show? Because there's sort of an endless amount of work to be done, but more importantly, it's our job as people who are in various forms of media and technology to be selective, to choose the shots that we think are worth the most energy. So, step 1, let's figure out what adults need to know. And one thing that's really interesting there is there isn't a ton of research about that because there hasn't been a whole lot of money, and research costs money. So one of the things we're working on is what should adults know? And we figure adults probably are a good source of that information. If you ask a 5-year-old, what do you think you should know for the next 10 or 15 years? You're not going to get a clearly articulated curriculum. But if I were to walk around the room and say, tell me about the things you feel would be most important for the people in this room to know, I'd get reasonably good answers. This is a pretty smart group of people, yeah? So that's step 1. How do we develop curriculum? The second is, we need to know a lot about adults and how they learn. And then we start getting into cognitive science, and we start getting into all the different aspects of learning related to positive psychology. Familiar with? And if not, you should look it up, because someone grew up in Philadelphia. And then the third piece, which is the most fun of this, of course, is how do we communicate these messages? Using technology, and we've got a game that wraps around this whole Sesame Street concept and all that, which is fun, and you can, I'll be around so we can talk about it if we don't do it in the big stage here. But the thing that I'm spending most time on is how do we develop a cast of characters that will be interesting to all of us, myself included. Well, we want to have puppets because puppets are fun, and puppets are probably a little underexploited in our world. So we need more puppets. And it's just sort of simple as that, right? So what we've done is we've taken the Myers-Briggs chart, the 16 different personality types, because that's a really good place to start. And we're looking at each individual type, and we're developing a puppet based on that. In part because we want them to not be alike, and because we want them to have alliances with one another, and because we want those alliances to break. So it makes for some interesting story. The other piece that we're working on is, where are these people? What is our Sesame Street? So I want you to imagine a bit about, well, you've got this screen, and you've got this screen, and you've got that screen that, what's your name? Archna is holding, and many of you have a similar screen, and we've got tablets and all that. So we have this wonderful window to an environment. What does that environment look like? Is it just a white screen, or do we want to create an imaginary space that includes both the place where the puppets live, 10 minutes, both the place where the puppets live and also where that interface lives. And we want to make that part of a participatory environment so that anybody who wants to learn has a specific clear path to do that. But also anybody who wants to convey information can also do that in an organized way so that we all grow smarter in a collaborative way together. It's high time the internet got there. We've got Wikipedia, which is a wonderful, amazing achievement. But we have a lot of stuff that sort of never happened on the internet that disappoints me. I want more from that iPad. I stare at that computer going, give me more. Do something else. And I'm not seeing it. We saw it at the beginning of the internet. We're not seeing nearly as much now. We see a lot more in small projects. I want to see something big. I want to do something that's going to change my life and change other people's lives too. So technology, curriculum, character development, environment development, in an imaginative place, in a place where you would dream about being and wanting to spend time. So where do you go for that? I find I don't go to the internet. I don't go to the internet for a lot of stuff. I go to books, and there's a reason. Books are written by people who really know what they're talking about, who take the time to think about it, who do one thing at a time. They write the book. And when they write the book and they do a good job, it stays on the shelf. But along the way, it's been vetted by other people who also care about the subject. It's a really good medium. I recommend it highly. Now, the book I'm reading, the book I was reading just before I got here, is a book called My Bookstore. And it's little essays, very, very short, very brief, by a group of authors who love their local bookstore. So we're imagining, what is the blue sky vision of what a cafe or a bookstore or a theater, what might that be if we were to create it and didn't have to actually build the bricks and mortars, at least not yet? That would be kind of a cool place, and it would be a place where you'd want to hang out, and it wouldn't be unimaginable for a puppet to pop up and say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about Einstein. Like, well, of course you have. So it gives us an opportunity to get into relativity theory, or it gives us an opportunity to get into cognitive science, and on from there. And it gives us an opportunity to introduce the authors who might have a 20-minute quick TED Talk, but don't get the opportunity to go into depth in any way. So we want to do that, but we want to do that in ways that engage the imagination so that you'll come back for the puppets and you'll stay to learn. That's the basic concept. And it's really fun, and we're far along with the concept, and we need all sorts of help. And that's part of the reason that I'm here, is we're trying to figure out whether this is an ebook platform where we release a new question, and I'll talk about that in a minute, every 2 weeks, or whether we go into a whole new technology area. We're trying to figure out how you do this, how you exploit this big screen and really make the most of it so that we create something that has a huge impact. Because the lesson I learned over and over again is if you work small, it ends up being a short-term win. You gotta work big. So I'm enlisting you guys to help me work big, and I'll be wandering around to talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about where this goes and what this means. Biggest thing for me is, wouldn't it be cool if you actually went to the internet every day and got a message from a puppet that knew a whole lot about something you wanted to know a lot about? That would make my day. That'd be a great thing, right? And what if you laughed, and what if, and what if, and what if? And that list of what ifs is what we're working on all the time. So we figured, let's start, because you can talk about it only so much. Let's actually write something. Let's actually hire some actors and just give it a try. So it's fine for me to talk about the friends from Sesame Street who are helping us to develop the puppets and all that. But at the end of the day, I really need to know a lot about the Second Amendment. A topic I can honestly say to most of you, or all of you, that I knew nothing about when I started writing. Something to do with guns, or was that the third or the fourth, right? Just not real clear about it. And I figured, let me try to write a coherent script. I'm terrified. I'm looking at books that are this thick about the Constitution, and they're written by Yale law professors, and I'm thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to get through this. How am I going to do this? Well, I tried, and I started working my way through, and I started understanding the patterns, and I really didn't work quickly. I worked slowly. I read books. I talked to law professors. And gradually, I realized this could be funny. That's an opportunity to flip around the way we think about guns, ownership, and I started realizing a few important things. First, the NRA has dramatically changed over the last 34 years. The original purpose, after the Civil War, shooting guns was a sport, and it was dangerous because people weren't accustomed to having such precise guns. So a group of people came together to teach people how to shoot guns safely, and that becomes the NRA. Cool, right? Interesting. In 1973, the NRA becomes a mid-70s, becomes a political action group of sorts, and eventually by 2008, the connection is made between the Second Amendment and personal gun ownership. But it takes until 2008 to bring that along. Interesting story, I got deeper and deeper into it, and as I did, I wrote a script, which you can see if you go to independencemedia.org, and you can get a sense of the kinds of things we're doing. We wrote it funny. We also wrote a few of them where we wanted to produce tears, because, if you're not gonna laugh, if I can get you to cry, that's a good way to learn too, right? So we've been having a ball with this. It's just a new concept that we're really trying to push hard to make happen in Philadelphia. Our offices are 3/4 of a mile north of Liberty Bell. We're a television station right now. We have big plans to turn this into something far more ambitious. Our goal is to create the next Sesame Street. Simple as that. And we want to do it on the internet, and I want to hire some of you people to do it with me. But right now, I'm in a development year, following about two years of R&D. But this is going to be an opportunity to have more fun than you've had at work, and I'm warning you, if you end up getting involved, every job you have after this will pale by comparison. Okay, so there's a little bit. Mike, show me how many fingers. Where are you? Whatever, who cares? Okay, so anyway, that's basically what I came here to talk about. I'll mention one other thing quickly, and that is, this is all about process. It's all about learning how to put together a career, and all about how to put together something that you can be really proud of. And over the years, I've assembled a lot of really interesting stories, but also a lot of interesting theories about how one works as a creative and technical professional. And I put that together in a book. The book is called The Creative Professional. It's here. Show me things. Good. All right, let's do questions. So that's basically what I came here to say. Thank you all very much for listening and for weathering a rotten weather night. And I'm here to answer your questions. Boy, that was really fast. That went by like, wow. Yeah, go ahead.
So,
and keep it a little quiet because I can't hear him and I'm 2 feet away.
I have Google, why do I need a puppet?
I have Google, why do I need a puppet? I challenge you to go deep on Second Amendment. Go into Google, watch every YouTube video, and then come back to me in a week and tell me what you learned. And then I'll sit you down with a puppet, and in 10 minutes I'll teach you more than Google ever could. Yep.
So I'm actually an instructional designer for adults.
I'm so happy to meet you. What's your name? Melissa?
I
How?
love what you're saying. So my question would be, is this something you imagine to be like a MOOC, like a massive open online course, but that's open 24/7 that people can interact 24/7 with?
Yes, in the style of an internet cafe concept that doesn't exist yet, that we have to invent together. I'll see you later. Next person. Other questions? Yeah. This will be interesting. Let's see how we do. Okay. A pleasure, and sometimes when you do a project, you want to take a snapshot in your head because you know it's not going to happen again. And I remember the last day that I was there, because I left after the 4th season, didn't stay for the 5th. And I watched the kids dancing on the map, and Rockapella's there, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this will never happen again in your life. This is one of those moments, boy, you better burn this into your brain. And now I want to do another one. But thank you for the, yeah. I'm coming.
I'm thinking of the personas much like buyers' personas, like the puppets. So is the information going to be catered to everyone's learning style and personality?
Will the puppets be designed to emphasize personality? It'll be emphasizing different learning styles and different thinking styles. So we won't emphasize those, we won't lean on those, we'll use subjects and watch the way people interact, or puppets interact, or puppets and celebrities and experts interact, and you'll derive it from the characters and the way they play. The idea here is to keep the instructional part of it really light, but really have people walk away with, wow, I've never really thought of it that way. So it's almost like sitting with a group of people who are just smart people, they just happen to be very smart puppets. Yeah, just stand up and say it. Curriculum, where's that coming from? So on the website, well, we're all going to tell each other what we need to know. So I'm going to point you towards this website, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, and this goes to everybody. If you go here, you'll see a tab that says curriculum. In curriculum, there are about 200 slots. We filled in about 70 of them. Your job is to fill out the form and give us some more. Then we'll form a curriculum committee and sort it down. So there will be professionals, but we want to crowdsource both the characters, actually the characters and the environment and the curriculum, because we don't know what people know, and apparently it's not a broad-based understanding. So we figure the best way to do it is to ask people. And I'll go back to just tie that up. The reason that I went out to individual elementary schools to talk to kids and talk to teachers and have them write down what they knew about England is because nobody could answer the question for me. So I went into the field and I answered it myself. And I used that as the baseline for the staff. I intend to do exactly the same thing. Why does it work? One more? No more. Because, okay, I'll catch you later. Thank you all.
Thank you.